you probably won't get an in-house studio position in the future in animation. And here's why. First, a bit of background on who I am. I'm a freelance animation producer. I have done contract work for animation studios, but I haven't held any long-standing in-house position at a major animation studio, despite being offered, mainly because I don't want to. I believe freelancing is the future of the animation industry, and I like the freedom that comes with freelancing. I want to run the projects, and instead of working my way up through an existing corporate structure, I decided to build a virtual studio structure around me with me at the top. It's a registered LLC where I am the 100% owner. Nowadays, I'm subcontracting more artists to help me execute the tasks I don't want to spend time doing. I call this a virtual studio. It's a very small, very lean virtual studio. We have no fixed location. I hire from anywhere in the world, and we can work on these animation projects even when we're traveling. We don't need to be in the same location. Here's a heads up about how I think the industry is changing. It's been changing for more than 10 years. And if you're an animator, or you have plans to become an animator, this is something you should really understand. The number of permanent creative in-house positions at animation studios decreases every year. And the number of work for hire contract opportunities for freelancers, aka commission opportunities, increases year upon year. So why is this happening? Well, it's a combination of technology and financial decisions triggered by world events. People used to not have enough internet bandwidth to transfer large files across the internet. And that made remote working very challenging, especially for video work where the file sizes are huge. But now pretty much everyone does have the internet bandwidth to send and receive large files over the internet. And that's changing the way we work. Furthermore, the COVID-19 pandemic showed businesses all around the world that remote work was possible, and in many cases superior to working in a studio. And animation studios have always had the problem of what Ed Catmull calls feeding the beast. What do you do with a whole studio of in-house staff that are paid salaries during the downtime between animation projects? Like, if you keep them on salary, you quickly fall into debt. So you end up just finding a project for them to make. And that's why B movies are made. It's feeding the beast. It's putting the workforce to work as much as possible to stop going into debt. Imagine you're a studio owner, and let's say that studio specializes in animated advertisements. When you first opened business in the 90s, you were limited to only hiring the talent that lived in your city. And that's the way you kept things. But you keep seeing these really unique and interesting artists on social media who live in different cities and you think to yourself, I'd really like to contract one of these artists, but they live on the other side of the world. As the studio owner, you're spending thousands every month on renting a studio space for your artists, with the idea being that in-person communication is superior to online virtual communication. But then you notice that 90% of the time your team is communicating over Slack or Microsoft Teams Messenger because it's disruptive or rude to just walk over to that person and interrupt them from their deep work state. So the team you have isn't fully utilizing their in-person studio space anyway. Most of the time, they don't want to be distracted, so they put headphones on and try their best to block out the distractions of the work environment. You also notice that during the downtime between major animation projects, you're having to pay the salaried in-house staff whether there is work for them to do or not. And this presents a financial burden that risks sinking the studio into debt if you're not careful. Then you get the idea to run a lean studio business where you shrink the core staff to just a few members, maybe even just yourself. And in replacement to the in-house animators you had working for you, you hire freelancers. All the in-house animators are replaced by freelancers, and they only get paid for the duration of the projects, and after that they're free to pursue work elsewhere. The in-house staff, their role will change from in-house to freelancers, so they're not exactly fired from their positions, but their contract changes to be freelance. This also allows your studio to benefit from the reduced taxes and lower living costs of working with an international staff that's not within your country. For example, here in the UK, you have to pay VAT tax when you're conducting business internally within the UK. But if you work with someone who's outside of the EU, you don't have to pay VAT, and that's 20%. When you, the studio owner, needs to hire extra hands all of a sudden to meet an animation deadline, where's the first place you look? Well, first place you look is in your address book of previous artists that you've worked with. But where's the second place you look? It's on social media. YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, that's where you go to look for someone to hire, typically. So hopefully with that, you can understand why in-house studio positions are decreasing and freelance opportunities are increasing. Expertise is more valuable than loyalty. This is something I learned from talking to engineers. The strategy of a software engineer has been that every few years, you change jobs and work for a different tech company. And with each job, you learn something new before moving on to another job. So you kind of dot your way around working for all these tech companies, and that actually improves your resume and it improves your negotiating leverage. And so I've tried to adopt a similar approach to that on my freelance projects, and I think it's worked. I try to take on short animation projects where I can learn a lot by trying to animate something drastically different each time. And with each project, I have to adapt and learn and build up a slightly different tool set. And then when I've done that project and I've finished it, I get to bring that tool set to the next commission, to the next project. And it helps. Each time I add a new tool to my tool belt, and it really helps. So here are some examples. Working for Sam Calder, I taught myself how to merge live action with animation in a variety of ways. That was the major challenge, and it was a great learning experience for me. And I applied that to many projects afterwards, and it really appealed to my future clients that I worked with later. And it opened up the doors for me to work on a lot of live action projects, making 2D animation that would integrate with the live action projects. Working for Osseous Klein, I learned how to generate music visualizers that are synchronized with audio waveforms using particle generators. So that was something new that I had to do, and now that's a tool. I've added that tool to my tool belt, and I can use it for anything moving forward. Working for T3 Pharma, I learned how to depict microorganisms, and that was a very interesting challenge. It was a lot more abstract than working with just like human scale. Directing a project for MSI pushed me into showing a cinematic story in a very short runtime and creating a cinematic soundtrack from scratch. So, a lot of lessons learned in creating music score and building a cinematic atmosphere with the sound and with the visuals. Making this opening for Chad Rivera, I had to learn how to seriously render water effects to look wet, which is actually a surprising challenge, and it's proving to be very useful in my new upcoming animated short film. And it became sort of a proof of concept to show that it would be possible for me to have the ocean as a setting for my new animation called Immersion. Working for Discovery Channel taught me how to compromise between showing animal suffering in a compelling way for this activism piece and to make it child-friendly enough so that it can air on national television. I had to bring in these considerations for the first time in my filmmaking learning experience. I learned a lot from that. And each time adding a new tool to my belt, getting this really diverse toolkit. And so because I can jump from one unique project to another, with each one, it gives advantages that I can bring to the next project. And these advantages show themselves in interesting ways. I think I improve faster this way than if I were making episodic content for a TV series, for example, where you're animating the same characters again and again and again. Or, you could spend years in that job and very quickly the learning progression would just taper off in one of these in-house jobs. So this is something that David C. Baker talks about in his book called The Business of Expertise. This book is more to do with consulting, but I think it applies very well in creative fields of all kinds. With every new client comes an opportunity, a new opportunity to negotiate. So my negotiation skills have improved drastically from freelancing and from choosing short projects where I change over clients a lot. And every time I change client, I get a fresh start, a fresh chance to negotiate 3 months on one project, 3 months on another project, 3 months on another project. That's 4 projects in a year. You have 4 fresh opportunities to negotiate your payment in the space of 1 year. You see, that's super effective if you're learning each time. You're learning what worked, what didn't work each time with your negotiation. You're probably increasing the amount you earn every single time, at least relative to the amount of runtime you're producing. So coming back to the change, freelancing is increasing, in-house jobs are decreasing. What to do about this change? What should you do? Well, for some of you, what you should do about this change is nothing. Maybe you already have an in-house job you're happy with. Well, stay in that job for as long as they'll have you. Maybe your heart is set on an in-house position at a specific studio, in which case, just keep following your dreams. Stop at nothing to get that in-house position if that is a really specific goal you've set your heart on. But maybe you are still an animation student without set ideas on where to go next. I think it's always good to be informed by a realistic and up-to-date worldview. So maybe this has helped just understanding the context in which you are coming into this animation industry. And I suppose if you wanted to, you could resist this change. If you have people in your neighborhood, for example, who are animators, and you all live locally and you want to start a studio together, it could be an amazing thing to resist this movement of freelance, scattered about the place. To have a central hub, if you wanted to set up a little in-house studio, that would be so cool. And to anyone who can make that work, I think that's fantastic. You may even find that there are special advantages that come along with resisting this new freelance economy. For example, you have a really compelling incentive for recruiting animators to come work for you, offering that studio space and that communal workspace. That's something that some animators really want. They really long for that. It also legitimizes you somewhat. That's just the public perception of brick and mortar studios. Even if you're not paying as much, an animator might want to work for you over a different studio because you have that advantage of offering an in-house job where you actually walk to work like a fairly traditional job. Some people want that. So it can be good to resist as well. So for transitioning, the age-old wisdom has been that after you graduate from whatever course you're on, you try to get an in-house job straight away in a well-established animation studio. And then you work for at least a few years, maybe 5, 10 years, until you want to become a parent. And then often parents want to turn freelance so that they can spend more time with their kids. Then you make that transition from in-house studio to freelancing. Now, I just want to set the expectation that that might not happen for you, even though that's what we're kind of taught. That's what we're kind of raised to expect as animators. It doesn't have to be like that. And in fact, it could happen the other way around. Like maybe you graduate from college or university, or you've got a portfolio put together of your animations and your art. There might just not be any vacancies for you at in-house positions. What I would suggest you do in that event, quite likely, quite possible event, you adapt your portfolio for freelancing. Now, it's only a few small changes you need to make in your website portfolio to make it appeal to clients instead of to studio directors. So I'd say make those changes so that you kind of open your doors to clients on the internet and start posting on social media. And that will put your name out there. It will make you noticed by clients who want to hire you as a freelancer, but it will also make you more noticeable to studio directors, the people who are likely to give you an in-house position at a studio. So either way, posting on social media regularly does help with your job prospects. Letting go. If you're like me, you probably have this nostalgic rose-tinted vision of a brick and mortar studio where the creatives in a studio can all gather around a PC monitor. They have in-person dailies where they give feedback to each other's animation progress, all within the same room. Like the good old days, like Disney kind of days when Disney was alive. And I'm not saying that that setting doesn't exist anymore. It's just that the industry doesn't appear to be moving in that direction. It's a lot more fragmented. It's a lot more international. A lot more of it is perhaps working from a home office or using a shared workspace, a co-working space, or working from laptops and like portable devices. That's also a possibility as well. So freelancing used to be something you would work your way up to when you approach parenthood, but nowadays it's kind of the default. You will by default be a freelancer, and then you might get the opportunity to work in-house. I'm generalizing a lot here, I understand that. I'm acting like a weather vane, just like telling you what the weather is with the animation industry and the animation as a medium. So that's it. Hope that information has been helpful to you, and I will be back again in another video talking, but in the meantime you can look through my back catalog and you can subscribe so that you see that video when it comes out. My voice is hurting. I'm gonna go. Goodbye.